Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Agree or Disagree the podcast. My name, of course, is Kevin Olenek. You can follow me on Twitter at KEVOLE. You can add me as a friend on Facebook, Kevin Olenek. Like Agree or Disagree the podcast on Facebook as well. You can find all my podcasts on Spreaker.com, KEVOLE. You can subscribe on iTunes and Spotify or wherever you find your favorite podcast, or check out the website, kevinolenek.com. And today we're talking a little bit about change. The definition of change is to make different in something particular, or to give a different position, course, or direction to, or to replace with another, or to make a shift from one to another. Tuesday, April 30th, or today, as we are doing this, or today, is the swearing in of a new government in Alberta, as Jason Kenney and the United Conservative Party has been elected as the new majority government. Now, for some, when we talk about this idea of change, there is a lot of optimism and hope in the air. But for others, this will cause a great deal of anxiety, concern, and mental health. And actually, it will probably cause a lot of anxiety, concern, and mental health for those that have won as well. So our topic today is talking a little bit about mental health and the expectations around election results and from our politicians. And our guest today, I think, will have a very clear perspective in helping us out about that. Her name is Alicya Perreault. You can find her on Twitter, of course, Alicya Perreault. She has been on, I think, 642 podcasts with me. She's the author of Take Me Crazy, Confessions and Lessons, mental health advocate, Welsh to the core, via Calgary or Okanagan. How's it going today?
It's good. How are you, Kevin?
I'm good. Are you in Calgary right now, or are you out with us folks in BC?
No, I'm in Calgary right now.
So I'm seeing pictures of snow, and I'm partially not holding all that I could to not show the sunshine that we have and no snow here. Are you still dealing with the winter of Calgary there?
No, it's all pretty much melting here now. But of course, Kevin, we still have the blue skies and the sun, right? I mean, it is Alberta.
That's true, and it will change in probably 2 minutes, and then
it will.
Back again. I'm going to start by playing something from Van Jones. Back when Donald Trump won the election, back the U.S. election back a few years ago. And this will help us get a little bit of a context of where we're going. So let's hear what Van Jones had to say about the Donald Trump's victory in the U.S. presidential election a couple years ago.
First of all, congratulations, both of you guys.
We're not there yet.
Well, you're further than anybody said you would be. And I have enough class, and I was raised well enough to say when you outdo,
yes, sir, thank you.
When you outdo expectations, good for you. But there's another side to this. People have talked about a miracle. I'm hearing about a nightmare. It's hard to be a parent tonight for a lot of us. You tell your kids, don't be a bully. You tell your kids, don't be a bigot. You tell your kids, do your homework and be prepared. And then you have this outcome, and you have people putting children to bed tonight, and they're afraid of breakfast. They're afraid of, how do I explain this to my children? I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country? I have families of immigrants that are terrified tonight.
Now, some may hear what I've just been played with Van Jones and wonder, how are you connecting this to Jason Kenney? Because there was a lot of, once the results were laid in, I did see a lot of results of concern, and there was a lot of concern during the campaign about the possibility of Jason Kenney leading the government. And for some, they're listening to what Van Jones had to say, and for some that are saying that this is ridiculous, there is a legitimate fear out there when there is a change of some kind. And not necessarily over dramatize this. I don't think that Van Jones in any way was over dramatizing it, but the legitimate fear of what people are feeling over. We're not necessarily going to get political. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But the politics of feeling lonely, abandoned, doubted, all of that. How do you look at this? How do we respond to that in a healthy way? And what about people that are in that mindset right now? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think this election was extremely emotional because I don't think there was sort of a moral dilemma because there didn't seem to be too much middle ground. So I think that there was so much divisiveness and toxicity and name calling, and it just created this negative atmosphere. And I think we have to remember too that scare tactics in politics work really well because fear is a driving force to get people to the polls. But on the other side too, fear can also be used to fuel activism and everything. But this election in particular, I think, created a lot of fear for a lot of people because we were reading so much. And I think too that if you're already dealing with anxiety and you were very emotionally invested in this election, I think that this created, it became overwhelming. And I think the problem is when you add this kind of stress, it's got a long reach because you can't hold on to this fear and anxiety and stress and not let it affect every part of your life. And I think, I mean, for my own thing, I was constantly checking social media and I found myself getting caught up in all the vitriol as well. Because you read things, and not only are you reading things from politicians and candidates, but you're reading opinions from everybody. And everybody was putting in their own opinion. And unfortunately, it became really difficult to see what was true and what wasn't. And, we don't take a lot of time to see whether the information is factual or not, on the days leading up to the election. So I think it created this, the sky is falling kind of thing where it got people to the polls, but there was no middle ground. So it almost was like, one side against the other side. And a lot of and because if your party didn't win, of course, now it's like, what's going to happen now? And a lot of fear is around that, what's going to happen? There's an uncertainty. And I think uncertainty is the core element of any kind of anxiety. And, the fear just grows. And we still really don't know what's going to happen.
No. And I'm not comparing Jason Kenney to Donald Trump, but there was this mentality that it can't be that bad. And, 3 years later, we have what we have. So the cynics in many are like, well, hello, you can't tell me how bad it's going to be. But in terms of the toxicity of the conversation or the toxicity around social media, was there a place, you talked about the polarizing view, was there a way to, in your mind, not to find a way to mentally find common ground, or is there a healthy way to keep your feet on the ground and keep the stand that you have, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, for me, there was a point where I just had to shut it down because, that checking social media all the time, it almost became an obsession to see what was happening, what was going on. But I find, you get caught up in it and I know it's emotionally unhealthy for me to get caught up in something like that. So I had to step back from it and take a break because it's really easy to get caught up in fear and outrage when it comes to social issues. And I had to do the same thing in the US elections because, I take an interest in elections, but when you get caught up in it, what you focus on gets magnified. So, when your stomach starts to turn and your shoulders creep up towards your ears and your whole body feels tense, it's time to step away because your emotions show up in your body before your brain catches up to it. So when you notice that in your body, that's like, okay, I've got to step away. I've got to get back to the present day and what's actually important in my life and not important in the world kind of thing. And it's the same thing what happened. We were in Britain during the Brexit thing, and it was really easy to get caught up in that vote as well. So you really do have to have a little bit of self-preservation and just step away from it, because this election I found really, really difficult. And when you brought up Donald Trump, I was reading an article that after the 2016 US presidential election, a lot of people were experiencing a noticeable increase in symptoms of stress and anxiety. And therapists were reporting that patients were bringing up politics during therapy, and that had never happened before. The researchers at Baylor College of Medicine did a study, and they published it in the Journal of Anxiety Disorders, that stated that people were obsessively checking the news and social media, and it almost became a ritualistic behavior. And it was just contributing to a fairly high level of distress. And these same individuals reporting really high levels of depression, anxiety, stress, headaches, sleeplessness. And they even started calling it post-election stress disorder. And of course, with any study, there's always evidence to suggest there is such a thing or there isn't such a thing. But regardless of what you call it, it doesn't take away from the fact that many people are fearful. What happens next? And it's still happening. And it becomes a vicious cycle because it erodes our physical health too, right? When we're not looking after our mental and our emotional health, it just erodes and it touches every part of our lives. And soon we're snapping at loved ones and getting frustrated at work, and it just affects everything. So you really do have to look after yourself and step back and away from it.
And it's such a tough balance because we mostly get our news from Twitter or social media. There is a connection that has been developed on social media. There is a passionate discussion that can happen. But at some point, you have to turn it off for your own good. Even though you may be in a passionate place of belief, it is important to kind of step back, isn't it? And just remember what you have or what you're dealing with.
Well, it is. And I think when you get really passionate about a certain, whatever issue you're dealing with and you're passionate about, when you get deeply embroiled in it, it's really difficult to see some things from somebody else's point of view and perspective. So it becomes a us versus them kind of situation. And that's really not healthy. So I think, social media is a really good thing because we're getting a lot of information, but it's also a really bad thing too. So I don't know there's really no easy answers other than to look after yourself and know when you're going down that rabbit hole, I think.
Yeah, well, I think something you said that I thought was really, everything you said was really interesting, but the thing that's catching me is what you said is what you're feeling in your body. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I was reading stuff, that I started to feel things, like there's a feeling, like, a feeling of emotion and anger, but there was also a physical response to it. And, there were times I wanted to just tweet out whatever was on my mind. And I, most of the time, decided that was not the best idea ever, because I was in this emotional place where it would have came across so wrong and not what I was trying to attend. But it just was getting, but it was so draining, like it was so, like, I guess recognizing the physical reactions to what you're reading and what you're hearing is a really important part, because it doesn't, I also wonder how because when your stomach is tightened, as you talked about, your shoulders are tightened, your jaw is tightened, everything is in your physical being is in this tightening place. It's hard to listen. It's almost like
absolutely.
You're almost like your ears are closed automatically.
Well, it is, and I think that's like every emotion has some kind of feeling in your body, and I think and I think we've talked about this before, Kevin, is when I had really chronic anxiety, I started to get really self-aware on how it shows up in my body. And for me, it's that, that gnawing feeling in the pit of your stomach, and you're like, okay, time to pay attention to what's going on. But I think when you're really mentally and emotionally involved in something, we ignore all those things that's happening, right? We try and, push it away until your body's all tense and you end up not sleeping and you're wondering why you have a headache or you're snapping at people. And it's just because you've ignored all those things that are happening in your body, and it just escalates.
Yeah. And it's hard to get out of that. How did you decompress from all of that? What happened for you on April 16th?
Well, we were in BC. So we voted early and then we took off to BC. And thankfully, because then I because of the time difference too, I kind of almost forgot when the polls were closing. And I just busied myself doing other things. And it was only because I actually removed myself from the environment. If I was in Calgary, I would have had that news on and I would have been glued to the television, or I'd be, checking Twitter all the time. But I had completely taken myself out of the environment and just almost forgot what was happening. And to be honest, it was the next morning I woke up to find out what had actually happened.
And did you feel like stepping away? How did you feel about that?
Well, I just know that it's better for me. And I'm one of those people, I need to know what's happening all the time, but I'm also a recovering control freak. So I know that I can just not involve myself in everything. So it was fine. It really was fine. I was too busy to really worry about it too much at the time. Not worry, but I don't worry anymore, Kevin. I'm concerned about things, but I don't worry.
Right.
But I had to recognize that whatever happened, the sky wasn't falling, and then whatever happens next, we'll deal with it.
For those that are in a position where they are in legitimate fear of a government change impacting whatever portion of their life, whether that's from an educational perspective, I'm a LGBT worker expectation, there's a fear of something being taken away. How do you balance standing in the gap and making sure that your issues are voiced and concerned, and the self-care part of that?
Well, it is a balance, absolutely. And I mean, I think the first thing is you do really have to look after your own emotional and mental health first. But I think, regardless of what your political views are or who you voted for, you can't let fear take over. But you also don't let it silence you. So I think that whatever you're feeling, if it was your party that lost, or if it's okay to feel disappointed, and it's okay to sit and have a little bit of fear, but you can't let that fear create a suffering. So you either deal with the fear the way you know how, or you channel that fear into activism and join a group or movement that you believe in, because quite often taking action towards something gives you a feeling of hope. Like it gives you a power back. And the one thing I want to talk about that too is that, in the last, I think probably since the 2016 US elections, youth have been more involved in politics than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's affecting kids that are not voting age yet. They're being active in this election, and this affects them. As we know, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't believe a lot of the things that were said during the election are going to happen. I think we're going to be more of a middle ground. I'm hoping. Maybe that's my hope and my optimism. But I think that I know in the U.S. anyway, the kids down there are reporting more emotions of stress, worry, fear, and disappointment. And they're not sleeping and not concentrating. And because, of course, their election was very polarizing as well. And the Alberta election, I think, brought up a lot of the same issues. And it has a significant impact on a lot of our youth. So I think that we have to really pay attention to what our kids are going through. Because if they're stressed about the election, I think we have to find a way to take that fear away and channel it in a different way. I don't really know what the answer is, but I really do think that we can't let fear and anxiety fuel anything. I think that's the first thing we have to do is deal with that.
Yeah, and I think that, part of that too is there was a lot of, I was glued to the TV set myself, because that's just me, and I was glued to Twitter, and I did see and hear and feel a lot of that legitimate disappointment of like, I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling all of this, and it struck me of how to find a way to support that, and to actually listen, make sure that people hear that, and not in the midst of celebration or feeling a sense of victory for those if your party won, feeling that you get to dance all over. Like there is a legitimate impact when one wins and one loses, and there's a hurt in that. And so I guess, how do we make sure that people are heard, especially in a platform where on Twitter specifically, where it is hard to listen because it's so emotional and it can be so, even if it's not in all caps, it feels like we're just yelling at each other and not listening.
Yeah, I think so too. I think as time goes on a little bit too, I think that, the fear won't be as strong, but I really do think that people need to connect with like-minded people. I think it gives you a little bit of hope when that's what I say too about, let it take action. Like if you're really passionate about something, find a group, find a movement that has the same views as you, and chat with them, join them, do something. And I think that kind of gives you some power. And I also think that if you voted for Kenny and, your party won, I do think you have to be compassionate and understand that there's a lot of people afraid and scared right now. So it's good to be compassionate and recognize that there are people dealing with a degree of anxiety, and to understand that it's not, we're all human and we're all trying to do the best that we can, and we're all in this together. So being on two opposite sides, we need to find a way to get middle ground. And I do want to say too that if you are dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety, the best way to do is to just write it all down, like completely empty out all those fears and anxieties and get them down on paper. Because when you see it there in black and white, a lot of things that we think are just assumptions. A lot of things that are going through our head, we're assuming. And a lot of times it's not based on truth. And when you see it down on paper, it kind of takes away the power. It's really difficult to sort out your thoughts in your head. It really is.
Yeah. And and especially in stress, where it can be It can be both. So much stuff can be going through your head. It's that's so true about writing it down and just clearing your mind and allowing that to sort out that truth is so true. You brought up Kenny and winning, and I also think that there is an expectation around, and I think that this was another theme in this campaign. Once, I'm just using the rhetoric. I'm not saying it's correct, but I'm using the rhetoric. Well, once Notley is out and Kenny is in, everything will be better. We'll be all back to work, and we're going to just have the hunkiest and dorkiest of lives, and everything's going to be great. And there's a legitimate fear around not having anything, and having this hope if a change happens. And you're seeing from Kenny's perspective, you believe, because you voted for him, that the economy and things will change in a positive way. How do you balance the thoughts around that? Is this gets a little tough? This becomes an expectation you're putting a government on a little bit of a pedestal to have such a high expectation that they will make changes, and it's possible that they will, but it's also possible that they can't, or they won't, or things will not go the way that you think. How do you balance that sort of expectation, those high expectations, to make them more realistic expectations, and give yourself that comfort and hope and balance, and almost in a sense realism as you go through?
Well, we're talking politics, and politics and realism really go together. But, there was a lot of promises made, as there usually is. But, for me, I know a lot of people, I know lawyers and engineers that have been without a job for a long time. So, if I don't really care who brings jobs in, I just hope that they're brought in. And I think the only thing we can think of now is we have to think optimistically, and maybe this will spur the economy, I should say. But, he is on a high pedestal that people have put him on, but that means he's got a very long way to fall. So I think that we're going to be watching, like, he's under a microscope right now. And 4 years is 4 years. I think Notley's government was in a very difficult situation. They came into an economy that was already, very low. So Kenny's got a good chance now to build on what Rachel Notley already did, and we'll see what happens. But I think we just have to go in with a bit of optimism and hope. You can't put your hopes too high. I mean, if you've been out of work for the last 2 years, you're not going to get a job tomorrow. But maybe there's hope down the line. Who knows?
Yeah, and I guess it's fine making you talk about the support. I guess what triggered you to talk about the support for those who lost. It's almost a support for those who won, because it's managing. It's sort of this manage of expectations, but also just bringing in, okay, you may not get everything you want today, and there is a process in getting yourself back and building the confidence of one that has lost a lot. And and the compassion part about that is whether the person was making 6 figures or 5 figures and they lost something, there's an emotional attachment to job. That's ego. There's an anxiety about providing. There's such a natural thing about, and I speak from a person that was fired, and we talked about this on a podcast. There is an ego part of that, and it does hurt when you lose something, and it's important to have compassion around that too, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of us, our jobs are what we are, so. And, I think, too, with this election is that I talked to a lot of people just casually and they were saying that, they like a lot of Kenny's policies that they were the economy. Mm. But they didn't want to tell anybody they were voting a certain way, because it was almost a vote for one was a vote against something else. Mm. So, it was a very strange election, I thought. There was no middle ground, but now I hope that, I think I heard somebody saying that they're hoping that Kenny was more like Harper, who did a campaign to get everybody, but then when they were putting policies in place, they were more of a middle ground. I don't follow politics very closely, because half the time they don't do what they say they're going to do anyway. But right. I think it's good to be vigilant, and if we see something coming up that we don't agree in, then we have to voice that. So I do think it's not going to be as scary as we thought. And going back, I know I was off your question there, Kevin, but I think whoever you voted for, I think that we just need to come together and just work together. Mm. Is that a little bit come by Irish? Maybe it is. I don't know. But I don't see another way, because we can't keep being on opposites. That we have to find a way to get back to the middle, I think.
But, I think that just is going down a different track. But I do think that I think you're bringing up something that is really important. And I do think that there's a mental health aspect to this, because I do think that there are some people that do not believe that there is a middle ground. That they do believe that if you voted a certain way, you voted against me. You voted against what I stood for. You did not listen to me. You put me in a very awkward position, and I'm very angry with you. And you may not be this type of person, but you supported it, and I can't associate with you anymore. It's too toxic for me, they say.
Well, that was a huge factor of this election. And I think there was so much divisiveness, toxicity, name-calling. And I think the constant negativity fed into that negativity bias that we have. Mm. Do you know what that is, Kevin? Or do you want me to explain what let's unpack that negativity bias?
Yeah, let's unpack that, because I do think it's important to do that.
Well, and I think it's important during the election, because negativity bias is a condition by which humans are predisposed to pay more attention to bad or negative experiences than to good ones. It's like the main reason we remember every insult we've ever received or every bad experience. And negative news makes a bigger impact on us than positive, and the media knows this, which is why we're fed, negative news all the time. And so do political campaigns, which is why we're more likely to hear really bad negative comments ramping up to the election, because we can recall all the negative news as we're going into the voting booth. So biological makeup causes us to dwell on negativity, so we can remember all of that. But that negativity bias can affect everybody. Mm. And we use that when we go into elections. So everything that has happened during this election, we can remember all the bad stuff. And it's really difficult to find any light then. Like, I don't really remember anything positive of this election at all.
It was really hard to, it got to the point when anything was positive or someone did something positive, it was squashed in quick negativity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, again, I forgot what the question was, because I think that negativity bias, when I realized what that was, like it light bulbs went off for me. But I think, and they use that in elections. So they scare you to go to the polls, and you remember this, because if you don't go vote for this certain party, this horrible thing over here is going to happen. So it was, I think it's just two sides right now that are scared. I mean, we're holding our breath, right? Wondering what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of almost time where you go, okay, enough fear, enough anxiety. The sky is not going to fall, and whatever happens, we'll deal with it. But the only way we can do that is by staying present. Because anxiety is detrimental not only to your health, but to your family's health, to relationships, job performance. It touches everything. So we really need to find a way to manage that anxiety so that we can kind of move forward.
Yeah. And which leads us to the actual people doing the job. And I think, there was a tweet from Jason Kenney as he was preparing his constituents that talked about the fact, and this was a tweet from Emma Graney, that you're going to have to sacrifice birthdays, anniversaries. You're going to have to work overtime. It's going to be a lot of hard work, which had a lot of people respond in a certain way, including Robin Luff, who I'll just pull up what she had to say here, because I thought it was interesting, considering she's a former MLA, what she had to say about this. I'm just going to put this out there. You can be an MLA and also a person. You do not have to miss birthdays or anniversaries. You can plan for that stuff, and you should. The macho attitude that a politician must be working every minute is old and tired. On one hand, I agree. I think that I think that there's an important part of self-care. But from a public perception, the way that I notice it would be, we tweet incessantly at certain people. Are we in a culture allowing for that freedom for self-care? Or is that not our problem? They have to find time to do that anyway.
Oh, I definitely don't think self-care is in the thought of it all. Like, I think that there is this perception that, if you're a politician, and, I'll say it, I'm not a fan of Jason Kenney, but I think what he meant in that tweet is, we're going to be working hard. Mm-hmm. And there will be birthdays our Calgary Council right now are voting on things, and, somebody's probably missing a birthday and somebody's probably missing something. I think what it is that when somebody tweets something, this is the thing about Twitter, Kevin. Somebody can tweet something and we can just jump on it and assume something, and we can take it apart where maybe that wasn't the intent of the tweet.
Right.
But boy, are we quick to jump on it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think Jason. I'm with you. I don't think he meant anything by saying, yeah, it's a 24/7 job. It's just, I think he was trying to prepare people for the reality of the work that they're in.
Yes. I think that was the intent of the tweet. But we're human and we have opinions, and we can just take anything and make it what we think it means. And Robin is correct as well. There is, you can't expect people to miss this birthdays and important things. But I think we're just so, I don't know. I think if I was a politician, I would just shut my Twitter down. It's too much.
Well, and it's because we have there's this 24/7 mentality of, like, we expect their every divine and attention in every moment. They tweet something, we respond, and we demand an answer. They feel for whatever reason they decide to block people. People get angry because they're blocked. There is a feeling, and sort of what I was challenging is, I know that people want to say that this is ridiculous, that you don't have to do this, but I think as a society, I think we're demanding 24/7 from our politicians. We're demanding not only 24/7, 365. We're demanding perfection in terms of attitude and performance and no fault. Which can only lead to burnout in my mind. I don't know how these people are going to survive for 4 years. I'm just thinking about it, and I can't even survive for 4 minutes.
I just don't think you can win. I mean, I think being a politician now is much harder than it used to be because every detail of your life is under a microscope. And I can't even imagine how thick of a skin you would need. Like, I really don't think you can have thick enough skin to not let all that vitriol affect you. Like, it has to. I think the mental strain that they're under, and not only them, their families too, because, you know, politicians usually have families.
Yeah.
So I think it affects everything. I don't know what the answer is, but, you know, we like to have accessible politicians, but what they have to put up with, like, I just can't even imagine.
Yeah. And then we get angry that they get paid for this. And then we get angry that they get a raise for this.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to like their policies, and you might not agree with them, but you really do have to respect people that run for office, because I sure couldn't do it.
No. Like I know that there were politicians have told me that they have a specific time that they do have to shut everything down because there was times that there was tweets about their children. And it was just like, okay, this is a little bit too much. So I have to have my own time frame that I do from like 2 to 10 or whatever it is. I try to treat it like an 8-hour shift. I've heard that from some politicians. And I think it's going to be also interesting, especially for the newer ones that will want to please everyone, especially if you're a people pleaser. This would be very tough because you're going to want to be everywhere at all the time. And that can lead to burnout too, because you're trying to help everybody out, and it's just the most important person that you need to help out in that situation is you, when that's the last person that's going to be helped out.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think sometimes we forget that politicians are just like us. You know, I mean, they're human. But I really do think we forget the human aspect of it when we're deeply embroiled in elections.
Yeah.
And I think what they have to do is step away. I think they have to have, I mean, obviously it's not a 9-to-5 job, but I really do think they have to step away, shut it down for, you know, a few hours of the family time, because you just can't be on 24/7. You just can't.
Yeah, it's impossible to do. It's sort of like the way I think entrepreneurs work. It's that same. It feels to me like the same work-life balance issues are. You feel like you have to work 24/7, but the reality is you can't work 24/7. You have to find some sort of balance and respect and things like that for yourself before you can move on to help anyone else. So it's an interesting balance that, you know, they have to find, but I think hopefully us as the public finds as well, because it's above agreeing or disagreeing with policy. It's just realizing that there's a human being there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that you really do. I mean, even for me, I work from home, and I had to end up scheduling, you know, everything into my calendar, which means, okay, I got to stop now, and I have to go to yoga, and I have to do this now, and I have to turn my phone off now, because it's a constant, you know, your phone's ringing and your notifications are going off, and you're constantly, your time is being taken away from you constantly. Mm-hmm. And sometimes then you forget to like get in touch with yourself. And then you're wondering why, you know, you've got a headache and why you're not sleeping at night. It's because you haven't really paid attention to yourself at all. And I know self-care is a big buzzword, and I try not to use the word too often, but it's just self-preservation. I mean, you can't be good to anybody else if you're not looking after yourself. And that's from everybody. That's us, politicians, families, everything. Like, I think we just need to be a little bit more compassionate, and a little more kind. A little more kinder to yourself and to everyone else.
Yeah. So important. Um, and I think this will be interesting too, because I think we're about to go through another federal election in a couple months here. That campaign will start. In terms of the toxicity around social media, maybe this will be where we end this, or unless we have other things to talk about here. But in terms of around the toxicity from social media that we saw in this Alberta election, I think this is going to be, I'm suspecting it's going to be amplified tenfold with this federal election, 20-fold even. I think we're going to have this in such a negative way. What sort of things do you recommend for people that are going to feel toxic around, that want to engage but yet also want to that need to decompress at some point? What are your thoughts? Kind of maybe some tools to help us out.
Well, I think that we have to be really selective on where we're getting our information from. And I think that if we are getting all our information from social media, we have to, instead of getting caught up in it, you have to look at it for what it is and really find the truth in it. And instead of just sharing things, I see a lot of that. Something will come up on social media and everybody's sharing it. Nobody's really looking to see where the source came from. And right. I know that's really difficult nowadays because we're getting news thrown at us from all over the place. But I think we have to remember that not everything, it's not necessary to get outraged over everything. So I think when you're getting upset or you're getting outraged, I don't know why I'm saying outraged, but just write that down, because quite often it's not based on truth at all. And if you feel it in your body, walk away from it. You just have to walk away from it, because nothing's going to fall apart if you walk away from social media for 10 minutes. So all I can say is you just got to be self-aware and self-preservation.
Yeah.
And how are we so lucky to have Alberta election and a federal election all in 1 year?
Oh, this will be just great for our mental health, and it's just that everyone's going to feel so good about each other, and we're going to be just singing Kumbaya by mid-October. We're just all going to have a big group hug. I can just see it now.
Oh dear.
But and I think that's the other part of this too and I wrote about this too, is just the willingness to sacrifice family and friendships over a position. It just seems so, there's so much talk around how important family is, and of course family is important. I'm not saying it's not, but just the willingness to close off, I guess, or not listen, or just get so angry, and to find a way to be that. I guess it's that negative bias, but just to feel so divisive around everything around you. And I'm not picking on one side. I think that that's just part of human culture and the human connection. But that really is concerning me. That we're getting to that people have gotten to that point where I don't want to talk to you if you feel this way.
Well, I think it just comes down to some people, it's more important to be right, and, for my own personal, I talk to my mother. I phone my mother every Friday night, and she likes to talk politics. And we are total on opposite sides when it comes to politics. So when she starts talking about it, I'll say, okay, we cannot talk about politics tonight. And then we have to pick another topic. Because I know that I will come away from that conversation not feeling very good.
Right. Yeah.
Because we won't find middle ground. We will not. So it's best just not to engage in it, because it'll be her wanting to be right, and then I will say what I think is right. So, you can't have a conversation that way. because I'm not willing to listen to what she wants to say, and she's not willing to listen to what I want to say. And to be honest, we're not going to change any, each other's minds. So it's just best to kind of leave it be. And I do that too, dealing even with this election, even just, at the gym or, wherever you are, and it turns to politics. If you really listen, you can pick the people who are determined to change your mind, because their mind's not going to be changed. So it's best not to just involve yourself in that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Because who wins in the end? Nobody really.
Nobody, really, yeah. And it ends up it ends up causing more harm than good.
Exactly. So one person walks away feeling like they've had their piece and they were heard, and the other person's like feeling, not so good. So politics is a tough one. And, being British, I was involved in that one as well. And that one is just as bad. Mm. And once our federal is over, we'll probably be hearing about the US elections again, because doesn't it take 2 years of
Oh yeah, and that's 2020. Yeah, that's almost a year and a half away for that too.
Yeah, and we're unlucky enough to be bombarded with all of that too, which will not be, it'll probably be as divisive as the last one. So I don't think we can win right now when it comes to politics.
Yeah. You're right, and I guess it's given me some reflection of how to approach my social media too, as to have it not as toxic, but just actually listen and converse, and as opposed to feeling like you need to argue with everyone, because you're right, you're not going to win, but you're not going to, but you do want to get your opinion out there too, I guess. So that's that balance, right?
Well, it is, and at the end of the day, is your opinion really that important? It's.
I hear people already yelling yes through there right now, just so you know.
Okay, yes, I know, and of course, those people, they have a right to their opinion, but a lot of times those people, they just want to change your mind because they're not willing to actually be open to another suggestion. So I think you just got to be selective on who you're listening to, and politely step back when the conversation is getting a little bit too toxic, I think.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of times, I like Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. But you can also mute words, and I've done that as well. I've muted Donald Trump, and I muted to the blacklist in Game of Thrones before I saw it. So you can do that. Yeah, just take it out. It's fine. You don't need to know everything that's going on. Most of it is not even true anyway. So be careful of what you're listening to. That's what I say.
Yeah. It's funny too, because Game of Thrones has been on everybody's mind since that the epic episode on Sunday. And I'm not the hugest Game of Thrones watcher, but the whole debate even around what people should be saying or not is just like, oh my gosh, just.
And I hate spoilers, so
yeah.
I got into the Game of Thrones quite late in the game and binge watched, and I was anticipating last night, and I don't watch it when it first comes out, so I know people just want to spoil it for you so badly, so I mute those words out.
Yes. Yeah.
That's what you have to do with politics sometimes, I think.
That's true. It's true. Is there anything else we need to touch on, or?
No, I think I just want to say that, however you're feeling right now, you're okay to feel that way, but don't sit in it for too long. Find a way forward, move on. It's really not worth your emotional, mental, and physical health. So find a way through it.
All right. And what do you have going on right now? Any book signings? Are you going to get out of the snow in Calgary? Is it snowing now? We checked it earlier. It's been 50 minutes.
It is not. No, the sky is still blue. and the sun is still out. We're all good here. So, what am I up to? Well, next week I start writing another book. So I'm going to write, I'll be kind of burrowing down to write that. And just also found myself getting involved in a grassroots movement to change the face of perimenopause and menopause. So it's early days yet, but it's really interesting. So there's lots going on, Kevin.
Good, good. And can you tell us a little bit about the new book you're writing, or is that still in top secret mode?
No, it's going to be my take on the first book was, going through anxiety and everything. And part of it was becoming a mindfulness meditation instructor and how it changed everything. So I'm going to be writing a book on my take on what mindfulness is, because that's a buzzword too. And when people bring up meditation, they don't understand what mindfulness really is. So I'm going to write a book about that where, there'll be humor in it too, because life has to have humor in it. And so that's what I'm going to be doing next.
Cool. And where do we find you on Twitter?
At Alicya Perreault.
All right. And of course, you can find me at KVOLE. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. KevinOlenek.com, Facebook, etc. And stay tuned for another. We have other podcasts. We did recap the Alberta election a couple of times, so you can check those out on KevinOlenek.com. We are doing a spoiler-filled review, and I've said spoiler, so if you listen to it and you didn't see it and we spoiled it, it's not my fault. But we are doing a complete review of Avengers Endgame, spoiler-filled. We've got our hockey stuff that we do every Saturday, so check that out. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think that this is very valuable to kind of... this was a good conversation. I hope it starts planting some seeds that I think people are starting to hear around how we're conversing with each other. I think that this is good awareness.
Good. It was great talking with you, Kevin.
All right. And thank you for everyone listening. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.